or so, and we'll see how long will it take. Um, I sent all the link to Mr. Ramsey's mail, so depending on when he clicks it, and we should be going live. Before we start, I just want to uh, start early, like I usually do, just so that if anybody joins, we can check the audio before the guest person joins. And also, since this is pretty exciting for me and it's kind of hard to contain my excitement, I get to ramble on a bit before he actually joins. So that's what I'll be doing for 5 minutes, just rambling to contain myself. Hey, Matthew, what up? Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the beardless stream. Do you know that it's been 6 years uh, since I've shaved this like much? The 6 years I had like a big ginormous beard. So this and already in 2 or 3 days it's already started growing. So yeah, right. Well, he's this handsome Squidward. Ramsey Dewey really is handsome Squidward. So hey, we got two people. What up? What up? Hell yeah. But yeah, we'll see. I keep it informal here. I don't want it to be like an interview, even though it's definitely, in terms of YouTube fame, the biggest person we've ever had on. I still don't want to do the interview thing or talk about like any drama or that. It's just friendly chatting about martial arts and philosophy and whatever comes our way, but in that lens and just a friendly thing. I think I just want to keep these that way. I haven't branded it a podcast yet, but it's more of a podcast than anything else, really. When I think about it, it's just random talking about martial arts without any proper structure or like a interview format. So yeah, I'll probably keep it that way. That's friendly cast. Yeah, that's what it's gonna be. If we do that Aikido tier type list thing, that's gonna have to be a bit more structured. But hey, it's still gonna be loads of fun, and no doubt we'll have a good time. So yeah, we'll just wait for a moment or two. The screen might freeze if I go and check the email to see if he's responded to the last one that I sent. So if the screen freezes, it's not the connection; it's just me leaving to check out. Bro, Tengu had a banger. Right. Tengu's awesome, and I'm so glad that he's appeared in the comment section on the channel because I feel like last year when this channel only had like 300 or 400 subscribers, I gave him a shout out, not because I didn't reach out to him yet, but it was something where I mentioned other channels that cover the same topics that I do and that do it better. And I mentioned that Tengu is a great growing channel. So it's been a while since I've put that out there on the internet, and now he's here. And hopefully we'll do a live stream just like this too. That'd be awesome. So yeah, definitely looking forward to more of these. But just one of probably the biggest takeaway from all these live streams that I've been doing is how nice all of you guys actually are. Like that includes you, that includes Robert, Duncan, Sergio, Jamie, Alan, every single one of you that I've talked to, because all of you were just sure, let's do a live stream, and it's crazy that that extends to even Ramsey Dewey, which from all that we know, he seems like the nicest, genuine guy. So it makes sense. But again, it's such a big gap in the YouTube world where he's 200,000 subscribers or so, and he's still like, sure, that sounds like fun. Let's do it. Just incredible stuff. And yeah, I still like Dan. Even after that comment, I'm sad that he didn't like that video. But look, I'm never going to ignore people who've inspired me, and he's one of those. So I definitely took his opinion into account, even though I don't really agree or think that he overreacted a bit. I still took that into account and made the whole video on it. So no hate from my side there, and there never will be. Uh, you're a dating supermodel now. Well, I do have a when I have the long beard, it looks like it makes my face look a bit longer and a bit pointier, and then this is just like, yeah, yeah. I mean, I get it. So, all right. So we hit the 10 o'clock mark here. Ramsey's time zone, it should be 4 o'clock. Ramsey's a supermodel. He's handsome Squidward. And we'll see if he'll be joining. I'll just quickly go to the mail. So the screen will freeze, but don't leave. Everything's fine. I just have to check, did he see the mail message? Okay, the link is sent, and we'll see. I hopefully haven't screwed up the time zone thing, because his time zone is 6 hours ahead, and here it's 10, so that would be 16, which is 4 p.m. and we said his 4 p.m. and so that should be it. But let's wait up for a few more moments and we can just chat, because you guys are here. So I'm not just gonna stare blankly at the screen. But yeah, absolutely awesome. All right, 970. That's crazy how this channel has been growing, and definitely there's more stuff to come down the line. We're doing a competition soon, so that's also happening, and a few more things, a few more updates in terms of like the camera quality, editing style. We'll try and up the channel as well, get ourselves some microphones finally. And a few things that I'll wait. Oh, here we go. Okay, guys. All right. It's Ramsey Dewey.
So it is. Hi, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me? All good?
I can hear you. Audio's coming through great.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll do my best not to freak out, though. We fail at that. But anyways, how are you doing? How's your day? Doing good?
Yeah, so far so good. So far so good.
It's awesome. Here we're having a beautiful day in Croatia, but I had to close my windows because in Dubrovnik, when it's nice weather, that means there's a lot
Yeah.
of posts on the walls where my window looks directly at all of them. So I had to
Okay.
close all the windows and enclose myself in a dark, nerdy room. So that's kind of sad and specific, but hey, other than that, it's awesome. All right.
Well, awesome. Great to be here. I'm stoked to be on your channel, man.
Wow.
Very
Thank you.
underviewed channel, I must say. More people should watch what you do, man. I've really enjoyed your content since you've
Thank
been
you.
making videos.
Wow, that's
Um,
a lot. But
I probably should have left more comments, but I've seen your videos regarding your skepticism on some very
oh,
questionable Tai Chi masters, and I enjoyed your input on the subject.
thank you. I really tried to be I tried to go a bit of a different route, because you've shown the debunking video where you go in the nuts and bolts of how it's performed, and a lot of people have done that. So I was thinking, well, why is my default position already that I don't believe it, even without going into debunking? So I tried to be a bit more to find a different angle to tackle it.
Yeah.
And a lot of those certain Tai Chi guys didn't get that one. But hey, it is what it is. I'll keep on trying to be
Yeah.
the
I
respectful.
would say it's you were as respectful and completely intellectually honest as you possibly could be. Essentially, just explaining the skeptic's standpoint on something. Again, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence,
Right.
and they have not provided the evidence for the ergokinesis that they claim. This is something I find so fascinating about fake Tai Chi masters is it's almost always a claim of ergokinesis.
Right.
And having lived in China for 16 years and actually trained with a legitimate master of Tai Chi Chuan, a guy who could fight, like really fight, he wasn't using ergokinesis, telekinesis, mind tricks, dim mak stuff you see in the movies. He was using everything he did was comprehensible and learnable, just martial arts done at a very high level. When we do
Perfect.
martial arts, yeah, it's it seems like magic because it's like if you roll with a jujitsu black belt for the first time and you've never done jujitsu, it seems like magic. It's like, wow, this guy is so many levels above me, I can't even comprehend what he's doing. But you learn it, you understand it, you realize, oh, it's based in reality. It's not some work of fiction. And Taiji, real Taiji, is no different.
Right. And that's like a great point because on this channel I try and cover as many martial arts. Well, I tend to say that we're about all kinds of martial arts, but currently mostly we've been tackling type like Aikido stuff, Kung Fu stuff, and this and that. We haven't gone further into like the depths of um,
Yeah,
uh, weird, strange martial arts out there.
of
But my
which there are many.
there's so many. But my whole point and whole thing is, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this. And it feels that a lot of traditional martial arts that have a really comprehensive like opus where it's not just like judo where Kano extracted few techniques, more something like Japanese jiu-jitsu, whatever like that might be, because that's a topic on itself for another day,
Yeah,
or like many kung fu styles. They all seem to have every range of combat in mind, and they're really comprehensive. And it makes me think, does it feel to you that a lot of these martial arts um, fail or seem to like not be functional is because, well, there's many reasons, but this is, I'm trying to zoom in on a specific angle, which is teaching or showing very complex low percentage techniques that only very experienced people can do, and teaching that to beginners as if it's a jab or a punch. Because a lot of times when I even see aikijitsu or aikido or anything like that, it seems like they're showing these very complex techniques that in concept a lot of them can work, but you need to be a fighter first. You need to have so much more
sure.
to understand them. And they're just teaching it like it's a basic. You just catch the wrist, you turn it this way, then if you crank here, then you do
Oh,
this. And
yeah, for sure. Wrist locks, I think, are one of the major offenders of this.
right,
Years ago, there was a young woman came to my MMA class, and afterwards she said, "Hey, I'm taking this class, just for self defense. Could you teach me something easy like a wrist lock?" And I thought, "Oh boy, man." Mechanically, it's simple to teach a wrist lock, which I think is why a lot of Aikido schools focus on this as like one of the first things they do, and one of the primary things they do.
right.
Realistically, catching somebody with a wrist lock, as you rightly pointed out, with is it's difficult to do
Yes,
unless you have very specific advantages over your opponent. There are a lot of things that are mechanically simple to teach and practically difficult to do. Like
exactly.
pulling off a wrist lock against a resisting opponent who is any good at fighting at all. We're talking like, oh, I don't know, maybe a guy with 2 stripes on a white belt in jiu-jitsu, like that level, catching a guy like that with a wrist lock takes a lot of doing. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of experience.
Right.
Now, if we're talking about catching a legitimate high level grappler, that's a whole different thing. That's like
Right.
bragging rights if you can catch somebody with a wrist lock.
Right.
Wrist locks are like it's like styling on people basically. But yes, I see this a lot, and again, wrist locks I would say are the major offender, but I do see this in other cases, and I see it in all kinds of martial arts classes. If you, I'm going to throw jujitsu out here a lot because it's something I do a lot of. You go to a lot of jujitsu classes, and they're all of that's practical, grounded in reality stuff. There's no woo woo nonsense. However, and this is an important caveat here, you will have a beginner go into a jujitsu class for their first time, and the coach will be teaching, all right, here's this goofy thing from deep half guard, which will be so situationally specific and is not going to help a white belt at all because they won't even know what this particular position is for.
Yeah.
But for these 3 purple belts and above over here who have experienced this position a bunch of times and will be able to recognize, oh, this is how I integrate this into my game. Okay, this might be a little bit helpful.
Right.
So there are a lot of offenders like that in any martial arts system. And I think a
Right.
lot of that just goes to sometimes it comes from people trying to do the right thing by following a syllabus of teaching. People
Mhm.
often ask me as a coach, like, do you have a specific syllabus of teaching? Because I think that's very important as opposed to just teaching the random technique of the day. Everybody should know exactly what they're expecting to learn going in to
Right.
each class. And that's okay until you have a new student in the class.
Right.
And then and then all of a sudden, if if your syllabus says, "All right, we are going to progress through all of this stuff up until we get to some nuanced details of deep half guard," and then new guy comes in for his trial class and he's like, "The heck is deep half guard?" And
Wow.
you cannot adjust your teaching patterns on the fly to make that approachable to everybody and applicable to everybody in some way, meaningful, then that's just bad pedagogy, honestly.
Right. Right.
So, structure is good, adaptability is better, I think.
Right. Right. Well, in most cases, adaptability sounds like the word that gets a lot of praise. So checks out,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
that's
man.
something very
At
interested
risk of
in.
sounding like Bruce Lee right there.
Well, as you've said before, you've already been excommunicated from the
The
church,
Church of Jeet Kune Do, yeah.
and I have
Oh, boy.
Bruce Lee gloves, Bruce Lee shirts, Bruce Lee merch. I have a high-end action figure just resting on a pile of geeky nonsense, and still somehow I'm not a true Bruce Lee fan because I've made a video where I essentially explored the topic where why is it offensive to call Bruce Lee an actor? And
I
boom,
know.
right?
Bruce Lee himself wanted to be called an actor. You know that interview, the famous one where he said, "Be like water, my friend," and everybody quotes that. If you watch the whole interview, he says he wants to be remembered as a good actor. Like, he specifically said, I don't like being called a star because what does that even mean, man? That dehumanizes me. I would rather have somebody say, "You're a great actor." And, of course, he was a martial artist too. I mean, duh, we know that. We can argue all day about what level of martial artist he was, but to say he wasn't an actor or that's insulting, I mean, actors are proud of their craft. That was literally his job.
It's
It
incredible. I used that clip at the end of the video where I was like, well, if you're offended, and don't take it from me, take it from the man himself. And it's like, why don't they tell me I'm a super actor? And it's like, come on, guys. He's a very proud actor, and that's great. And like you said, duh, he's also a martial artist. Nobody's disputing that. So,
Yeah, not just that, I think Bruce Lee was he's really underrated as an actor, specifically because he is overshadowed by the cult of of Bruce Lee cultists, basically, who want to hold him up as the god of martial arts. Do you remember the movie Fist of Fury?
Yes. Chinese connection, right? Because I
Oh,
confuse.
yes, it has different names in different countries. So it's the one where his teacher is killed. It takes place in Shanghai back during the Japanese occupation,
Right.
and he gets really angry and he goes on this killing rampage. And I watched that movie again recently through a different lens. I watched it this time through the lens of I want to understand what kind of actor he was. Because again, I was reflecting on what he was saying. I want to be remembered as like a good actor, not just not just a star, man. And so I focused on his acting, his expression, his physical emoting, etc. And I realized this dude could act. I mean,
Right.
he won a prestigious award as a teenager for a
Right.
dramatic role. And of course, most people haven't seen his dramatic roles because he was young. They're in Cantonese. They didn't achieve the international fame that his martial arts films did, etc. But if you can just watch his face, hear his own voice, like hear it in the original Cantonese, it's kind of funny. They filmed it in Cantonese in spite of the
Right.
fact that it took place in old time Shanghai, where they would have been speaking Shanghai Hua, the Shanghainese language. But of course, Bruce Lee didn't speak that. Most people don't outside of this city where I live. Um,
Kind of like
but you,
alien speaking English in sci-fi movie.
yeah, yeah. But even if you don't speak a lick of Cantonese, which I don't speak Cantonese. They don't speak it in this part of mainland China.
Mhm.
You can still hear, you can feel his voice. It's quality acting, and I was like,
Right.
wow, this is really overshadowed by his stunt work, basically, by his
Yes.
choreography,
Yes.
and more so by the cultists. And when you call out the cultists, they think it is an ad hominem against Bruce Lee,
Yes. It's
and there's
crazy.
no convincing them otherwise.
Nope. Because, well, first of all, to just join on the acting thing, I definitely agree, specifically in that film, because it's more emotionally packed than I think any of his films that he did. And just there's I remember watching it as, of course, everybody remembers the ending, and I can remember myself as a kid, just tears rolling down with the amazing music and the freeze frame at the end. That's crazy. But before that, when he is about to approach the final fight, when
Mhm.
he's not fighting the instructor, he's fighting the guys before, but he gives them an opportunity to leave. And just that physical performance, just the pain and just all that in his face where he's like, scram, just leave.
Yeah.
They won't leave. Just that, it's so good. Like his face and just the mannerisms in that scene, because it was still cool, but less macho cool like when he beats them up the first time. This time it felt like, okay, this is painful. Just leave. And it's such
Mhm.
a good scene and such good acting. So yeah,
It
people
it's a
forget about.
humanity we can relate to. Like,
Right,
everybody's been angry, everybody's felt, um, injustice in their lives before, and we don't all know how to express that. We haven't all had the cathartic experience, and Fist of Fury was a way to encapsulate that.
hmm
It wasn't just fun kick punchery on the screen to
right.
make the martial arts nerds be like, "Yay." But, I mean, it was that too. It
Yeah.
was that too. But yeah, man. The older I get, the more I appreciate the human element of Bruce Lee. As a child, I idolized I was very much the Jeet Kune Do cultists, if you will. This is why I understand them on a deep. Yeah, you too, right? And it's funny because when I talk to when I talk to these guys online, I assume they're young, like how I was when I felt that way. I assume maybe they're a teenager, maybe they're 10 years old, something like that. And then I find out most of these guys are older than me. Most of these guys are like in their 50s, 60s, and I'm like, "How? How are you still in Neverland? How have you never grown up?" It's
Right. It's oh, And that's such a great point because whenever I think about Bruce Lee in a day, just Bruce Lee pops into my head and I start like thinking, it's always such a big nostalgia trip
Hmm?
because he's been so influential in like the early teenage years, which I think are the most influential years when your brain starts developing, you're getting a bit of an ego, but you also start thinking about things and boys like to be boys. So like Bruce Lee
Hmm?
as a role model was super important to me. But it stayed at that level. I remember regarding the whole skepticism video that I did, I remember starting to be a bit more like deeply thought out, interested in philosophy, and tried to like think about how valid my opinions are on this and that, and uh, exercise some sort of intellectual humility. And further into that I got, I would think I would still have these opinions on Bruce Lee, which completely contradicted the way I started to think. And so it just one day it was like poof. It wasn't even like a big destructive
Hmm.
feeling of something changed my mind. I just woke up and one day was, probably none of that is true. And that was it. So,
Yeah,
so yeah, I don't
indeed.
know why some people don't leave that. What can you do?
What indeed? What indeed?
I think probably doing actual martial arts has something to do. I had to showcase it a bit. Do not leave him out of the conversation. He had to announce himself. But I was gonna say, probably going down the actual combat sport route certainly has to help a bit with that. I'd
Hmm.
think, even
Oh,
though
for sure.
right, because even if we like in the live stream that you did where you said or somebody I think did a super chat where it was like why do TMA guys want to claim Bruce Lee when he fits
Yes.
right? That was such a great comment. And it even if we take that into account that he's more of a combat sport even though he's never fought, but he's more on the realism side,
Hmm.
it's it's still interesting. Oh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh no. Oh, where was I
Oh my.
going?
So, good question.
Mm.
So, Bruce Lee is claimed by traditional martial artists as their lord and savior,
Yes.
but he himself was more on the combat sports side of things, and he was like the biggest hater of traditional martial arts.
Yes.
Um, where were we going with that though?
So I think that people who've actually followed what he was doing sort of escape that same problem, is what I'm thinking. Where
Hmm.
even so here's an example with me. So I was very much into JKD, into Bruce Lee, and into glorifying the man. But one thing when I would research, I'd research photos of him sparring with boxing gloves and partners and doing all these training things. So what I would do is buy some gloves, pick them up, and go out with friends and spar. So later on, when I wanted to go into let's do some Wing Chun that Bruce Lee used to do, let's do this and that, I got shocked that they don't spar at all. I thought that a lot of them have changed since, you know, that whole thing. And no, they haven't. So I think that's the route that a lot of like Bruce Lee fans who actually go into the I don't want to claim right or wrong direction, but with respect to the goal of actually trying to learn how to fight,
Yeah.
then sure, the right direction. So I think a lot of Bruce Lee fans don't do that. So that's could be one of the reasons
Yeah, I
why
think
they
that's definitely true of a lot of them, for sure.
right.
Hmm.
It's a fascinating topic.
It
So yeah,
it is really, it is. We're delving into the realm of human psychology here.
right.
And
Maybe
then
we're going a bit too far with the Bruce Lee thing.
well, martial arts is a microcosm for everything in a way, which is something I find so fascinating because it attracts a lot of weirdos, to be honest. Well, I'm going in two directions with this. One, it's a microcosm for everything because you can learn all kinds of things. Not you will, regardless of which path you take in martial arts. You can learn a lot of things. You can learn about athleticism, sports science. You can learn about strength and conditioning. You can learn about combat. You can learn about the psychological aspects of combat, combat stress, so on. You can learn about human psychology, predictive behavior. That's a big thing if you get into combat sports. Predictive behavior is such an important thing to understand as far as fakes and feints, strategy, etc. Because in a
Yeah.
fight, we don't really have the opportunity to plan anything out. We act or we react, essentially. We
Yes.
try to compel our opponent to be the reactive element, and we are the actor in that situation if we're doing it right. And what else? We can in martial arts, it can lead us toward things like rehab because we're going to get injured, right? Can teach us things about first aid and medicine and all of these other things if we follow it through to its logical conclusion. So
Right.
martial arts can take us all kinds of different ways. Intrapersonal relationships, because we're always dealing with other people in martial arts, whether we're a student of it, a teacher, a gym owner, etc. It can lead us into the realm of business as a gym owner or somebody trying to make a living in any capacity as a martial
Yes.
artist. It can lead us into theatrics and acting and stunt work like Bruce Lee himself, for example. So martial arts can be a gateway drug to all kinds of pathways in life. But at the
Right.
same time, my second point is that martial arts attracts a lot of weirdos.
Oh yeah.
And not everything in life attracts a lot of weirdos, but martial arts, I think, especially does. A lot of delusional people, because one of the biggest human delusions is the idea that c- we can. I I hesitate to say protect ourselves, defend ourselves, or fight, but the idea that we are somehow immortal, the
Yes.
delusion of immortality. And
Absolutely.
we all know at an intellectual level, we're going to die, we're mortal, if we're cut, we will bleed, etc. But none of the living have died yet. And so
Yeah.
it's not yet a reality. We're only able to see what we've already experienced. And so this, I think, is the root behind the idea that the average man believes he is 9,000 times more effective in a fight than he really is, as the popular meme says.
Yeah.
For
I,
one, they haven't experienced death and mortality, and two, they haven't experienced a fight yet, which makes us more aware of death and
yep.
mortality. So,
I think I think one of the best things I've heard, and I can't remember where I've heard it. So whoever I'm quoting, or if I'm misquoting, I have no idea. But it was like why they love jujitsu specifically.
hmm,
All kinds of combat sporty, realistic martial arts or whatever, but specifically jujitsu is that the only way to get good is if you tap thousands of
hmm,
times, and
okay, yeah,
every is a micro fracture on your ego.
hmm,
Every tap is getting you so just a teeny tiny taste of what death is, but
hmm,
without actual like danger or like craziness of like being in a near death situation, just like
yeah,
micro fractures. And it's the only road to get better. You cannot escape that road. So
hmm,
I can't remember who said it that way, but I definitely agree where it's like you will get better by failing, and not only does that failing keep you humble in like this very like worldly type of way, but also in a deeply philosophical and like
sure.
uh,
It kills a part of us that doesn't belong on the mat. It
right,
kills a part of us that doesn't work in a fight. And
wonderfully
there's
put.
so many parts of us that don't. Like we think they do. It's a 9,000% higher estimation than reality. And yeah, those perceived failures in the gym, that is the success of chipping away at the garbage that doesn't work, that doesn't serve us in a productive way.
Yes.
I often refer to a heavy bag, for example, as a garbage can for bad punches. You throw out all your bad punches there so you
That's
don't take them into the ring with you. The training mat in the gym, that's a garbage can for your bad grappling techniques, so you
that's
don't take them with you into the cage, for example.
well, that's such a great and it's very analogous, really, when you think it's really what it is. Like you're trying to get the technique better. So that's a very creative way to say it. I'll be stealing that. Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
That's but yeah, and it's the only road to actually get better at fighting. And well, also one thing that I think about a lot, and I tackled a bit of it last live stream, where it's like
Mm,
the whole arguing about subjectivity versus objectivity, where this is a waste of time, this is the way to do, and it always makes me think how that whole conversation only exists if we have agreed on the goal that we're trying to reach. So, like, when I would showcase some Aikido stuff, and again, it's not really Aikido stuff, it's stuff that exists pretty much
mm.
everywhere, is mostly associated with Aikido and sort of put on a pedestal by Aikido
Right,
as
right.
the ones
Are
that
we talking
train
about
in,
wrist locks here?
yeah, and stuff like that. So, wristlock takedowns, even worse.
Yeah.
um, and if somebody says, "Well, that's useless. That's a waste of time," it might be a waste of time for you or for him, but it might be totally different for a completely different person. So if we set up a goal, whereas I want to get to the UFC in the next 5 years, that absolutely is a waste of time, but only
Mm,
the respect to that goal. If you're just doing it, one of my friends said, I've got time for any martial art that's being honest with itself. And
mm.
that's what it really is about. So I don't know. I've been rambling. You can just, if I don't
Yeah.
want to.
So as far as wrist locks and all the flippy dippy Aikido stuff that they pride themselves on, I would say you can teach to a combat sports athlete what is valuable about that in one easy lesson,
Mhm.
as opposed to spending 20 years in an Aikido dojo to try to learn all the nuances of the art. What is valuable to a combat sports athlete, say an MMA fighter, about the Aikido syllabus is make a closed fist and they're not going to wrist lock you.
Yeah,
What is valuable about that is be in the right position instead of the wrong position, and that's never going to happen to you.
yeah,
And again, we can cover that in one easy lesson. As far as using those strategies offensively, that's kind of a lifetime pursuit.
yeah.
Defending yourself against those strategies, again, one easy lesson. So it's kind of shocking though if you can shut down an entire martial arts system with one easy lesson. What does
Right.
it say about that martial arts system, right?
Right. And it's it's such, and it's also such a hard thing. Well, at least for me on YouTube, uh, where I have trouble with this type of thing, which is all the labels for martial arts.
Mhm.
Because if I'm making a video, if I'm talking about this or that specifically, I've gotta label it. But even if I'm doing something specifically where, look, I caught this wrist lock and I really enjoy exploring this type of technique or entry, and wow, it's a very esoteric looking thing, I still don't know what to label it as, because I've learned it on my own or have learned it from a completely different martial art that isn't famous for it. So it's like the whole idea of labels is
Yeah,
so
yeah.
hard to wrap my brain around. Like I sometimes just sit and think 30 minutes about like all the all the best ways to try and quantize, because what people I think forget is that it's us humans who describe things. It's us who see the differences, compare and contrast things, and then we choose to call this this and that
Hmm.
that. But
Right.
what it actually is could be completely a different separate topic. So when I do like a koregaeshi and then show it on the channel where it's like this is one of my favorite techniques and it's super goofy or whatever and interesting and lower percentage so it feels cool to get it. I could call it aikijitsu, could call it aikido, I could
Right.
just call it BJJ or butterfly wrist lock from Chin Na, or even Wing Chun. I've seen people from Wing Chun doing that wrist lock. So it's like,
Sure.
why
Yeah,
does
it
it need
exists in tons of martial arts systems. I could name others. You see it in Tai Chi, you see it in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you see it in Judo, etc., etc. I think we're dealing not just with labels, because a label is it's giving a name to something.
Mhm.
It might come with some baggage, but that baggage is what we're talking about. That baggage is putting movements, techniques into a faction, into a cult system, right?
Yeah,
Into the cult of Aikido, into the cult of karate, into the cult of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, etc., etc. Like, which faction will you join? Which of all the martial arts is true? As if it were a religion. And
right.
that's where it gets very strange. A wrist lock is a wrist lock is a wrist lock. It's bending a wrist in the wrong direction, and people want to get dogmatic about that for some reason. I mean, it's
It's
it's literally just bending the wrist in the wrong direction.
right. Or the
And
right.
and we build up and we build up philosophical movements around the idea of I know 15 different ways to bend your wrist in the wrong position. I know a dozen different ways to make your elbow hurt. It's when you say the quiet part out loud, it sounds incredibly stupid. But
Right.
yeah,
It-
there
oh,
are no
sorry.
new martial arts techniques. I would say this. I'll tell you a little story about the time that I invented the three-quarter Nelson. Okay, so when I was fairly new to grappling, I discovered that if you put did I say three-quarter Nelson? I meant quarter Nelson. So three-quarter Nelson with the gable grip, quarter Nelson with the
Okay.
double wrist lock here. So I discovered the quarter Nelson independently, having never been taught it. If you get a whizzer, if you get a collar tie, if you change the position, lock your hands up like this, pull the elbows in really tight, then you've got a lot of control over your opponent and their posture. And I was like, wow, this is golden. Why hasn't anybody ever done this before? And then one day I was looking at some ancient Greek statues, and I'm looking at these statues of wrestlers, and one of them is doing my move. And I was like, that's my move from thousands of years ago. What? And then I start looking it up, and I start seeing my move in other sources like old catch wrestling books. And then I start seeing modern grapplers doing this. I didn't see it before because I didn't know it before. Like I
Ex-
said, we cannot see what we don't already believe. If we haven't experienced it, if we don't already know it to be true, we don't see it.
exactly. Oh, this this is such a good such a good story because specifically of that like blindness of the
Hmm.
person who isn't aware of a particular aspect or how it works
Right.
because you have a series called fantastic fictional fight scenes, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely adore that one as a major geek. Absolutely one of the
Man,
best
I'll have to
things.
make more now.
Yeah, no pressure. But I was gonna say, I remember when I started training like combat sports a bit more seriously, and when I sort of hit that like little what would you call it, not a first step into actually being able to spar and
Right.
roll and do it carefully and feel free and not scared doing it. I remember going back to like movies I would watch and then checking out action scenes on like the TV and stuff, and
Hmm.
it was so different than how I used to look at it. It all kind of
Hmm.
sucks, really. Like I can't
Yeah, yeah.
enjoy a typical action movie fight anymore. It's so preposterous.
Oh,
Even in
yeah.
real movies, even in like drama thrillers, they're very realistic, gritty. And then some policeman fights somebody and it's like and they fly, hit the ground, don't even have the wind knocked out. They just get up and do more. And it's like, what
Mhm.
is this? So that's another example of that. Like I wasn't able to see that before I actually learned how fighting actually works. So
Mhm.
that's interesting. And yeah, I don't want to ramble again and cut you off. But
Sure, yeah. There's a very specific choreography style that came out of Hollywood from, I would say, the mid to late '80s that lasted through the early 2010s,
Mhm.
and it still exists. It's still going on there, where it is this mix of, like, how can I put this? Like, karate movement, um, classic Hong Kong kung fu movement, and, um, I don't know, American stunt work for lack of better terms. And there's a, how can I put this? This entire genre is protected by, what are they called? Unions, because
Mm,
they are unionized. The stuntmen are unionized. The choreographers are unionized. They only let the people they like into the club, basically, and they have their system down. They don't want it to change. It's in their best interest to keep it going. And so it's very rare to see a different style of stunt fight choreography on screen. So take, for example, when John Wick came out, this kind of broke the mold a little bit, I should say, because in one way, John Wick is like the classic Korean action star who, I don't know if you're familiar with Korean um, action
oh,
movies from like the 90s and the early 2000s, but they had basically two genres: fighting, martial arts, and guns. There were the gun movies where the guys would just shoot each other. I saw this one. This guy gets shot no less than 300 times. He absorbs the bullets like they are minor inconveniences, keeps going to the bitter end for 2 hours, and finally triumphs over evil. Typical Korean gun action movie. And then the martial arts movie where, they're fighting, and it's kind of the same thing, but just unbelievable amounts of damage, and eventually the hero prevails. John Wick is like a combination of those two archetypes, but
right,
very different fight choreography. They brought in, for example, um, Nick and Sai Collier. They are judo experts. They're young guys. You can see them here on YouTube, actually. They've got a channel. It's not a big channel, but they are really, really good at classical judo. Like, um, it's hard to express how good these guys are at judo. They're great at stunt performance. They're great at fight choreography. They've also excelled in competition in judo, in sambo, in sanda, Chinese kickboxing, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well. So, they know what they're doing. And these guys worked with Keanu Reeves, they worked with Halle Berry and the sequel and so on. And so they're incorporating it with all this classical Korean style gun work,
right.
jujitsu and judo, and all of these movements we haven't seen on film for a very long time. We used to see this stuff on film, like a long time ago. I'm trying to think of the name of the film. You can see the clip here on YouTube, but it's an old black and white film from like the 1940s where there is a fight scene with a lot of jujitsu technique going on,
Right.
like practical jujitsu technique, and it looks cool. But once again, if we are not familiar with jujitsu, we don't recognize what we're seeing on screen.
Yeah.
What When I was a teenager, I didn't even see the whole thing. I was flipping through the channels on TV and Lethal Weapon came on, like the end of the movie, close to the end of the movie. And Mel Gibson's character does a triangle choke and chokes out the bad guy with a triangle choke. And I'm looking at this like, the heck is he doing with his legs? I'd never seen a triangle choke before. Most people hadn't. What I didn't know is that at the time Mel Gibson was training with the Machados, and that didn't become public knowledge, at least not to the Brazilian jiu-jitsu community, for some time. And he wanted to showcase some of this Brazilian jiu-jitsu he was learning in the movie, And then we never really saw that again in American cinema for the longest time. But that left an impression on me, like, that's not normal fight choreography. That's not just punches and kicks and
Right.
hi type of stuff. But that looked super effective. What was that? And it wasn't
Right.
until many years later, post UFC, where I saw people using the triangle choke in real life, and I was like, that's the move from the movie. That was that weird thing. Why don't we see more of that? But
it's
it
it's an interesting topic in on itself. Again,
sure.
it's film has been for a while with us now, and it's interesting how like you've mentioned before, many of these traditional martial arts that feel ancient are really just from the 20th century.
Mhm,
So it's interesting how you can see like film becoming a big thing and all these martial arts just like growing with each other. So that's interesting because I would often see like old self-defense instructionals that are really black and white from like the 30s or 40s. I'm not sure right now. It might be wrong, but it's so cool because you see very old school judo or jujitsu in that sense, and it's so unique to watch that that was there, but then how that related to actual film and
mm,
action on TV. Because like a lot of stuff that we will understand, the general audiences won't. So it might not
mhm.
be the decision to make when you're making a film. Even John Wick is still not very realistic in what they portray.
Yeah,
It's just
obviously,
that
it's over the top craziness.
right. But the
Like
techniques visually are there. You can notice Ippon Soinage. You can visually see that these are real techniques. Just the context of them is preposterous.
yeah, like, it's funny listening to firearms experts, for example, break down movies like this where they're like, "Okay, in this particular position, you do this thing. No, that's a big no-no, man." Like and yeah. One of the crazy things is how many gunfights we see in movies, and they don't affect the hearing of the protagonists at all. They're using these high caliber weapons, just essentially causing loud explosions right next to their face constantly,
Right.
and then they can carry on a normal conversation afterward.
No problem. Oh, and
It's,
even this just reminded me. I think it's in the second John Wick film. Even though they had the silencers, which still aren't that silent for people. I'm not a big gun person, but I know that
sure.
that's how they work.
Yeah,
And
they make a
that's
noise.
right. And there was that silent, subtle shootout by the walkway where they're just trying to shoot each other from uh, very like walking very casually and just like pew 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 pew. And it's such a funny scene, but those bullets would be whizzing about. They would be hitting the floor. They would be hitting the points of impact. It would be so loud. There's no
Mhm.
chance in like no way that that could work that way. And a
Yeah,
lot of
but
video games forget that
we have
too.
been trained in the TV trope of you put the silencer on the pistol and suddenly it's just a little pew, pew, pew
Yeah.
sort of sound. TV tropes are a massive influence on human culture, and they have been. I mean, television in general, for example, has shaped the English language in a tremendous way, both in the United States and the UK, for example. 100 years ago, there were massive changes in regional accents and dialects across America and also England. In England, for example, you would go to one side of the city and people would speak completely different than they did from the east side or the west side, let alone go to a different town. It's almost like a different language. Today, you'll find people in Wales sounding almost identical to the way the BBC broadcaster speaks. Similarly, in the United States, 100 years ago, there was a pretty wide range of accents and dialects. Today, you'll find people on the East Coast speaking exactly the same as they do in California. Why? Because that's where movies and TV originally came from Hollywood. And so the
Right.
Hollywood accent propagated across the country and became accepted as the normal American accent. Similarly, TV tropes, including the fight tropes, they train us in a way of how to
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Professional wrestlers understood this for a very long time. So if you look at, say, American professional wrestlers versus Japanese professional wrestlers, it's all scripted fighting, but they use different techniques. The Japanese wrestlers, for example, will use a lot of leg locks, and the American professional wrestlers usually won't. Why? It's because the American audience hasn't been trained in the narrative. The leg lock is a deadly technique that will make the guy surrender. But the Japanese have. Meanwhile, the American wrestlers trained the audience in the idea of this big, flashy, flamboyant move you can see from the nosebleed seats. That's the dangerous move you need to respect and cheer for.
That's
So,
interesting how much that influences just perception about everything.
mhm.
And if I'm not cutting you off, it
No, no.
also one of the things when I first experienced that like moment where it was like, well, I can't enjoy any action scene anymore, really, unless it's like deeply fantastical or whatever, or if it's Batman. I've got a Batman bias, so
Yeah.
um, but it really made me think. Oh wow! Like how many more things are like this that I'm not aware of? What other area of life that I might not ever be able to like learn that thing or gain any kind of expertise in that, but I'm blind to it, and I have deep misconceptions of how about how that work. So it was almost a bit existential for me when when I, to be honest, when I first experienced that, and sort of like you recognize at a certain point that there's no way that you'll ever be able to be really good at everything. That's humanly impossible. Maybe Batman
Mm.
can do that. None of us. But you can cultivate how you think about things. So what I would do is, well, I I can't know what I don't know. So I'll make sure to exercise humility in times where I engage with something that I might not know. And so that also I think played back into the martial arts thing where it's like it helped me drop a bunch of like misconceptions and nonsense even further because it feels like, you know, when they say martial arts are the way to get like humility and this and that, and it really depends. It depends on the martial art and it depends on the person. And I'm thinking for me, I'd say definitely I've got some sort of both intellectual humility and just like general humility, I guess, from martial arts. But it really isn't because of that. It's because for whatever reason I noticed that in the moment and started developing. But not everybody's gonna go that way. It doesn't have to be the goal. So I just that why I'm saying that I just remembered I think a video that you also published where it's like a fighter doesn't have to be a good person. A good fighter is a
Hmm.
good fighter. And that's
Yeah.
also sort of a myth that if you do martial arts, suddenly you're a warrior in the garden and you're this deep person. But that's not how
Oh,
it goes.
man.
So
Since Jordan Peterson quoted that statement, "A warrior in a garden rather than a gardener in a war," every martial arts weirdo has been repeating that ad nauseum. It's become like, come on, man. Come on, okay. It's a nice thing to say and hear, but do we have to rub it into the dirt?
yeah,
Yeah. Here's a question for you. And this might seem like it's coming out of nowhere, but hear me out. So you're familiar with Batman, right?
yeah.
Also Spider-Man, you're familiar with Spider-Man? Are you a comic book nerd at all?
I think
Sweet. Okay. I'm asking the right guy. So s- if Batman and Spider-Man switched villains, okay, who has an easier time fighting the other's villains? Spider-Man fighting Batman's villains, or Batman fighting Spider-Man's villains?
oh dear Lord, I never thought of that. Wow.
Yeah. Now the reason I ask is because I saw a very interesting video about this subject, and I'm blanking on the guy's name. I actually ended up subscribing to his channel after watching the video last night about this subject, but he got a ton of hate for this assessment, and it reminded me so much of the hate we were speaking of above when you speak of the realistic Bruce Lee
Ah,
rather than the supernatural Bruce Lee,
right,
or
right.
when you get real about martial arts instead of dogmatic about martial arts. And it made me realize something. Comic book nerds, they'll fight online. They'll type angry things like, "Ah, you suck. I'm unsubscribing from your channel because you think Batman wouldn't beat so and so or whatever." Whereas martial artists often tend to sometimes, but not always, end up getting into physical altercations over their disagreements. So I still am interested in hearing your assessment though. Let me throw out some specific characters here. Okay. Now there was an actual Batman and Spider-Man crossover comic book where they
Yes,
respectively fought the Joker and Carnage. And they
yes.
did switch villains, and Spider-Man easily beat the Joker by punching him a few times.
I was gonna say,
Meanwhile, Batman beat Carnage by tapping into some psychological aspect of Carnage
right.
that came out of nowhere and was never addressed in the comics before or after. Whereas in reality, like Carnage is a massive threat in the Marvel universe. Like he, for example, killed one of the iterations of Ghost Rider, for example, which
He
is a big deal if you understand the power level of Ghost Rider.
overpowered.
And yeah, and he's an overpowered character. And he's essentially, if the Joker was less mentally stable, more insane, and like 10,000 times more powerful. And yet, this comic just kind of gives Batman a Deus ex machina, like, yeah, we'll solve that problem just like that with some thinking. Now, of
You
course, if Batman were to win that battle, he'd have to think through it, but I don't think that's the way.
no.
So my assertion would be Batman would have a much harder time fighting uh,
Yes.
Spider-Man's rogues gallery than Spider-Man fighting Batman's, mostly because Batman's villains are mostly normal people who are psychological threats. Spider-Man's villains are often that plus superhuman abilities.
Right.
So,
I
but you
definitely have.
can't say that out loud without making people angry.
Well,
But
we're
again,
doing
you're
now.
at least some of the people.
Right,
But
right.
you're a comic book fan, so what's your emotional reaction to me saying that?
So so firstly, I have to say I was gonna definitely agree with that because I remember reading. I think it was the first crossover
Mhm.
where Batman managed to beat Hulk.
Right.
With the idea of what they thought of is actually kind of cool, where the Hulk was gonna puff and do the clappy thing. I forget
Mhm.
what that it does. It have a name or a
Yeah, yeah.
gamma blast or something? I know they used it in a lot of video games as a move.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, But Batman specifically timed that to like knock the wind out of him to like
Mm.
try and turn him back to Bruce Banner. And it's like an interesting, like I'll give it kudos to the writers of thinking that. But how in the name of love did Batman manage to even touch Hulk with his
Right.
limbs? Like no matter how like full Hulk's lungs are with air at that moment, Hulk is indestructible. How can
Mhm.
Batman even like push him a little bit and give him any force to deliver that strike? So that never sat well with me. And I feel like Batman, for having the reputation of being the realistic superhero, and this is again controversial, to me, he's one of the more unrealistic characters in comic book
Hmm.
history. I almost feel that Superman is a bit more realistic than Batman, simply because there's an in universe explanation as to if a being like that came down and existed, he'd have these type of superpowers. While Batman,
Right.
being normal human, does things that no human can.
Mhm.
Superman, I
Yeah,
mean,
this
for Batman,
that's a
it does.
great point, man. There's some inconsistency in the way Batman is written. Superman is consistently written. He's got a set of rules. The writers follow the rules. These are his powers. These are his limitations. This is how he works. Batman, on the other hand, like we can see, he can have a hand-to-hand fight with Ra's al Ghul, for example, who's a tough guy. But Ra's al Ghul's real power isn't his hand-to-hand combat, it is his tactical leadership abilities, right? That's what makes him a dangerous foe.
I just
But he can have a
mentioned
hard time with Ra's al Ghul, but then throw him against an actual, literal metahuman, and for example, he practically kills Superman.
yeah. How does that
How?
work?
How does that work? Right.
It's no consistency. But before I chime in on that, I have to say I really appreciate the Raish pronunciation versus
Yeah.
Roz.
Ah.
That's an OG comic book guy right there. Yeah, that's. I always preferred Raish because it sounded like Wraith, and I always preferred that. When the Nolan movies
Yeah.
came out, Roz, it's cool, but it doesn't have the same sound to me. Just
Yeah,
whatever.
once in a while, comic books will actually come with pronunciation guides. Like some of the writers, they'll like write in italics with like an asterisk off to the side. Then you go down to the what do you call it? The section at the bottom where it explains what they're saying. And there was a Batman comic where they actually explained what Batman's accent is like. And
Yeah,
he basically has an old-timey Chicago accent, according to the writers, which
crazy.
is something that's never appeared on screen ever. And it's an accent that's kind of died off in modern America, so it makes sense if he was speaking like an old-timey Chicago gangster, for example, that you might have seen in an old film noir movie,
Right,
it would seem out of place.
right. But that.
Similarly, like
Oh,
Spider-Man, he's being canonically said to have a Queens, New York accent, like an accent that really sets him apart, where a native New Yorker can tell, "Hey, you're from Queens." And Spider-Man asked, "How do you know?" "From your accent."
yeah.
But we never hear that in any film version of Spider-Man. He never has that distinctive Queens accent. And again, that's something that's also dying out in the modern world,
Right.
unfortunately.
Stuff in the comic book world, specifically Marvel and DC, which are super famous, that haven't been tapped in like more like mainstream pop culture. There's so much stuff. What I'd love to see is now that the MCU has really like almost essentially run its course in terms of like the big popularity, and I don't think like the big cinematic universe is the way to go. Everybody's a bit
Hmm.
tired of the whole multiverse, both cinematic universes and this and that. Like what I
Yeah.
keep thinking, imagine like movies that are completely like singular to themselves, not tied to any universe, and it's just a piece of art for itself. Like, but make it unique in terms of period pieces or like specific genre films.
Hmm.
Where what would you think of a Ghost Rider film
Mhm.
that's a western with Carter
Okay.
Slade that's done in a Western fashion and that it's not super fantastical, that is just fantastical in terms of like the horror elements.
Oh, that could be really cool. I mean, there have been comic books about that subject. Now,
Exactly. That's stuff I'd like to see. Or maybe a black and white Hulk horror movie that's driving
yeah,
inspiration from Frankenstein films. That type of stuff I'd love to
yeah,
see. So
DC animated films do this really well. Not the DC live action movies. For some reason, they really just should follow the template of the animated films, but they don't. But they are brave enough to go into to explore these areas like, oh, what's it called? I'm blanking on the name of the film, but it's it's shown in like 4 different vignettes, and it shows Wonder Woman in the Old West, if she was like an old-timey gunslinger, for example, and
right.
it's really cool. And then it's got, Batman in like, Conan the Barbarian type of, a situation, and just these characters taken in a completely different context,
So
and it's awesome. And, again, they explore these more niche interests, if you will. they
Yeah.
think they're niche interests, but it's what comic book fans love. It's what we've always wanted to see from these characters.
Yes.
And as you were saying that, another thing I realized what I've always wanted to see from the Marvel Cinematic Universe isn't the world-ending threats. I don't want to see another, Thanos or whatever, even though that movie made a lot of money, and that's what producers think everybody wants to see forever and ever. Amen. I want to see the street level characters. I want to see Spider-Man team up with the Daredevil and go fight the Kingpin or some classic situation like that.
People
I want
people
to see,
forget
yeah,
that team up. I just talked about to somebody, one of my friends, fairly recently about this. Punisher, Daredevil, Spider-Man,
yeah,
even Moon sometimes, like Ghost Rider is sometimes in the mix, and like they forget how often these guys are their own little team up, and
hmm,
how well they fit together more than Spider-Man in the Avengers. Like for the most part, he was never really part of the Avengers. He was always the his own thing, and so just I get it from the business standpoint. Spider-Man's such a big property that you gotta have him, but it's like what I would love to see is a TV show, kind of like Daredevil was, just for Spider-Man, because that character works so well in a episodic formula where you can
yeah,
spend with him. Like I remember you mentioned a lot about Ultimate Spider-Man comic books,
hmm,
probably my favorite origin of Spider-Man, and that like progression in terms of the story. If they were to just make a TV show completely same how that story goes up to like issue, I don't know, 70 or something,
okay,
I'd love that. Like that type of thing where it's just episodic, slow progression. You watch the high school life, you watch this and the troubles with we all know about Spider-Man, but all the movies always it's either a montage or it's mentioned. Even the first Raimi movie, which is awesome, of course,
hmm,
but really um the whole high school thing is more or less just like an intro montage thing about we don't spend much
yeah.
time right, and I just
I
love
know,
to see.
man. It's like every Spider-Man movie, for some reason, it's always Spider Kid, it's always Spider Boy. In the original comics, Spider-Man was a teenager for a couple of years, and then the rest of the run, the rest of the 616 run, Spider-Man is a man.
Yeah,
He's and we don't have a canonical age because, he's been around a lot longer than the character's visible age, but he's a man, he's an adult. He's not in high school, that he's way past that. But we never see that part of him in the movies.
right.
So it's
Ah.
yeah, I haven't read it yet, but they just essentially did another book also called Ultimate
Ultimate.
Spider-Man.
I haven't read it
But the
either.
premise the premise is very interesting sounding to me, where Spider-Man gets his powers in his mid-30s. He's married to Mary Jane, he has children, and then he learns how to be Spider-Man as an adult, and I thought, "Oh, that's an interesting concept right there." That's kinda
And
like almost like the writers got sick of teenage Spider-Man from the movies, and they're like, "Maybe they'll make a movie about this. Let's go in the polar opposite direction."
I'd
So
love
I
that too.
respect that.
Right. And I have to still read it too. I haven't read it, but I've heard that it's really good because
Mm.
the writers have been keeping Spider-Man in like stunted development for a
Yes.
while. From
Yes.
2008 with the one more day thing that just makes me shiver and feel really bad inside where it's
Yeah.
some of my favorite stories came from J. Michael Straczynski's run. I think that was
Mhm.
early 2000s, where he was
Yeah.
like a high school teacher and he had marriage problems with Mary
Mhm.
Jane. He was a man in his like 30 something, and that was such a unique
Yeah.
view
Man, that was
on
that was like my favorite time in the Spider-Man comic book
yeah,
series, yeah.
that'd be
One
crazy.
More Day, man, when you said that, I just cringed inside like, "No, not that, that ruined everything." Uh, but, there was an interesting book. I don't remember. I think it was actually drawn by Humberto Ramos,
Okay.
when he did a few issues of Amazing Spider-Man. like right before the One More Day thing. And in that issue, Spider-Man, Peter Parker claims that he knows how to kill the Hulk. And I thought, is this foreshadowing? Are they going to set up a fight between Spider-Man and the Hulk? And he says it like it's an absolute sure thing. Like, I know how to kill the Hulk. Not necessarily that he would do it, because apparently he knows Bruce Banner personally, but he knows how to do it. And I thought, why haven't they ever followed up on that? Because that's such an interesting premise.
There
Like, not just
is,
defeat the Hulk, but kill him.
yeah, they never, from my knowledge, they never. Well, probably I haven't read many Hulk comics past like the Stan Lee stuff and just a few random stories here and there. But certainly somebody has killed Hulk, probably many times. Some,
Probably. Everybody's died, at
yeah,
least every good superhero has died at least 3 times.
yes. But I was gonna say there is. I remember like a single issue comic book, and it's so hard to track it down because I think those were just one-off stories in like 2007-ish, I think, or 8, somewhere before the whole One More Day, I think.
Hmm.
And there was a story where um, Peter wakes up and there's literally a rocket heading to New York. And it's like, what is happening? Why is this? Blah, 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 blah. And it turns out that Hulk is being tracked by a missile, but
Hmm.
somehow they whatever screwed it up and he's going into a city and now it's a dire situation. So I think Peter he teamed up with Hawkeye, who was sent by I guess Shield or whatever. I don't remember it fairly detailed. And then Peter explained them the situation and Hawkeye was like, oh my god, what is going on? Like, who did that? The rocket is coming to Manhattan.
Hmm.
And Peter, in the beginning portion of the issue or the short story, I guess, he was watching Bruce Lee on TV,
Yeah.
and it was like a very weird mixture of like typical like pop culture Bruce Lee thing, and Bruce Lee in that movie for some reason did a dim mak or something like a t- and Peter was like, well, I wish I knew that or something like that. And later on, when Hulk arrives at Manhattan and they absolutely can't stop him, Peter is like, "Aha! I might try and do that." And he literally touches Hulk a few times here, and he reverts to Bruce Banner, and the rocket just turns itself off, and the day is saved. And that is
I
so.
remember this issue. Yes.
Yeah, you remember perfect.
I remember it, yeah.
Oh my god! And I a long time ago, and it's such a funny that like, oh, TV thing, I can do that. Choop, 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 choop. And I mean, it's cool that defeating the Hulk reverts him into Bruce Banner. But how would that work?
Maybe the Hulk is just ticklish, and Spider-Man was just tickling him, and tickling the Hulk makes him revert. Everybody thinks, like, you're supposed to, uh, throw high ordnance at him and explode the Hulk or whatever, but the real thing, just tickle him a little bit.
Or maybe it wasn't Bruce Lee; it was Adam Meisner.
Whoa. Whoa. Can we talk about him for a minute? Adam Mizner?
Absolutely.
Is it Mizner or Mizner? I don't even know
Wait,
how to pronounce this guy's last name.
me neither. I heard that one of those is a joke, but I have no
Okay.
idea which one.
That Yeah, it both sound kinda like miser or something, but
No, Mike.
yeah, so I made a couple of videos just talking about Taiji. Whoa, you disappeared. Where'd you go?
Oh, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay. I looked away for a minute. I looked back. You were gone. Like you're Batman. You know how Commissioner Gordon, he's always talking to Batman, but not looking at Batman like, Batman, we need to. Where'd
You're
you
right.
go? Oh, I hate it when he does that.
Right. Right.
And Batman just disappears. Okay. That basically happened to me. So I got 2 monitors going on at the same time here. So
Okay,
one I can read from and one I can see you on.
perfect. Perfect.
Um, well, anyway, so I made a couple of videos talking about Taiji. This is how I learned about Adam Mizner or Meisner or whatever his name is. And some people started saying, "Oh, you really need to check out Adam Mizner, because he's like the epitome of Tai Chi." And bear in mind, this is after I met Master Wu Dao Shui, who the legitimate guy who could totally fight, like really fight, physically strong, physically fit, even at age 80, and he understood combat. He understood hand-to-hand combat really well. He could teach it, he could do it. He could walk the walk. Anyway, and they're telling me Adam Mizner is the real deal. So I look at his channel, and I'm hoping to see a demonstration similar to what Wu Dao Shui did. And instead, I see a demonstration of fake ergokinesis. That's a fancy word. You know, the word telekinesis means move things with your mind. Ergokinesis is you touch something and you can move it by essentially hijacking the nervous system of a person and making them move without using any physical power, just your mind. And this is
Yeah.
what Adam is teaching. And what's so fascinating about this is, and I've met people in real life who have told me, no, he's totally legit. I've met the guy. He can do these things. I haven't met Adam, but I've met some people who've gone to his seminars and they swear up and down he's the real deal. And none of them have been able to replicate any of these feats or show me how it works or anything like that. But they swear up and down he's the real deal. So I watch this and he is saying essentially, you just put your mind into your feet or into your hands and then make the guy jump across the room doing a little bunny hop.
Right.
Or fall on the floor. And let's assume for a minute that Adam really can do these things he claims. Let's assume if he places his hands on you, he can hijack your nervous system and make you jump across the floor doing a silly little bunny dance,
Yeah.
or drop to the floor, or fling you across the room, something like that.
Yeah.
If you watch his seminars, if you watch his videos, how does he teach his students to do these things? What is the
Poorly.
actual? Yes. Yes, he essentially says, you do the thing by doing the thing. I move you with my mind by moving you with my mind.
Yes. Oh my.
It's it is the worst example of pedagogy I can imagine. Like
Right.
I've compared it to, like, if you went to a world champion in Brazilian jiu-jitsu who had an amazing guard passing game and said, "I'll pay you $200 for a private lesson on how to pass the guard." And he's like, "Okay, I'll take that $200. You pass the guard by passing the guard."
That's hilarious. And it's so true. I've seen other like Tai Chi or Ki Chi guys like Adam Mizner that give, even though it's all like obviously nonsense, they give more detailed explanations as to what they're pretending to do than Adam Mizner, who's supposedly one of the biggest ones that
Mm,
literally tells you to just do the thing by doing the thing. It's incredible. It's so vague. So this is feet energy. Now this is hand. This is soft. Now this is hard. Watch again, soft. What does that mean? Like you're not actually. If it was real, there would be some sort of mechanic. I can't just. Well, you do this super sleek, sneaky body kick by kicking the body. That's if I did that, nobody would want to learn from me.
yes. And another thing I notice Adam and guys like him often do is they will throw out, Chinese jargon once in a while, usually badly pronounced.
Oh,
And I'm not one to judge because my Chinese is terrible, but I've lived in China for 16 years and I know what Chinese sounds like, and I know enough Chinese to get around in Shanghai for a living. But, ah, for example, there's a term that's often used in teaching martial arts, "peng jin." Jin is a type of force or strength. Peng it means structure, like a little shed or a little house or a little hut. But when you combine those two words, it means structural strength. For example, you stack your bones in the right way. You make the correct skeletal frame, and this is a very common thing in jujitsu. For example, you use structural skeletal strength because your bones don't run out of energy like your muscles. You stack your bones in front of your opponent, so he can't break through that by using his strength, and it's a more efficient way to move, right?
yeah.
Now, if you ask a good jujitsu teacher to break down Peng Jin, but structural strength in English, that they'll be able to explain that to you. You put your arm or your leg here, and then your bone is in the way. He can't walk through a solid object. But then Adam Meisner will just throw out the word. He won't even
Yeah.
say Peng Jin. He'll just say Peng. You use your Peng, and it's like, what does that even mean? That doesn't mean anything the way you're saying it. It's not just that it's badly pronounced, which it is. And I don't want to harp on him for mispronouncing Chinese words because my Chinese sucks, even though it's better than his by magnitude orders of magnitude. It's it's that he's using the jargon to try to sound more authentic unless you actually know anything about Chinese, in which case it sounds awful.
So it's like, imagine if in English we're doing a Muay Thai class. So now you step, and then with your back leg, you do the leg, not the leg kick. You do the leg. That's what it makes me think about. And then you do the hip or the head kick.
Yeah.
It's it's so funny. It's so funny, and it's the same with Fa Jin as well, where it's like the Fa Jin,
Mm.
the release of energy. That's like you've mentioned, and we made explicit videos on that. That it's not about knocking people out. Isn't just like I've got this super bomb in my fist. It's much more than that. It's positional alignment, structure,
Mhm.
timing, and also feinting to get the position to land the final, not the first, the final punch to knock somebody out. That's also signs of Fajin. You can say, oh,
Mhm.
Fajin, do this, and energy, woo woo stuff happens. So you can explain even that with real world examples. And
Mhm.
none of it ever gets explained in any of these Mizner Meisner, Snow Miser, and videos.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, man. It's and this is one thing that, like, I haven't heard anybody else talk about. People will poke fun and say, like, "Oh, this thing looks goofy," and it does, or, "I don't believe that, I'm skeptical of that," but the actual teaching method,
Yeah,
it's so strange that somebody who is absolute garbage at teaching becomes a famous teacher. If you look at any other martial art, like, let's look at, say, Shane Faison, the Fight Tips guy. He's been making quality instructional videos on how to punch and kick and box and kickbox and do martial arts related things on YouTube for a very long time. And because of that, he's garnered a large audience. And many of the people watching his videos can say, "Hey, I did the thing that you taught me to do and it worked. I'm a better athlete and a better fighter now. Thank you." Um, I don't think anybody can say that of Adam Mizner.
yeah,
I followed your tutorial because there is no tutorial, and I became better at Tai Chi.
yeah.
The example, the teaching method we're getting right here is if I pretend hard enough, I can gain a cult following and then gain some financial success.
Right. It's and I hate how these people tend to put themselves on like a moral high ground. I've got the high ground, Anakin. Sorry, that had to come out of me in mid sentence.
Yeah.
But it's really annoying because it, we're trying to point out that they're being scammed, and now I just have to respond. I've got a great comment from a great martial arts YouTuber as well, One Man Stampede. He says, "Tell him about our April Fool's prank." Are you
Hmm.
familiar with our April Fool's prank?
No,
We-
what's that about?
it was an idea where me, Nick from One Man Stampede, and Alan, who's a Tai Chi guy from In Defense of the Traditional Martial Arts, who both of them cover Adam Mizner extensively, and like tried more or less get some sort of like, of course, poke fun, but I feel that these are relatively fair takes on what's going on. And especially Alan being a Tai Chi guy, he feels it personally right there because he's fought 3 times in the cage and is very honest about like what martial arts are, and he's a Tai Chi guy, so he gets a lot of woo-woo Tai Chi guys attacking them. You're not doing real Tai Chi, this and that. So, and our idea was, well, we're getting so much traffic and so much hate from the Mizner people for our relatively like open, and in my opinion, I feel like that they're not really that aggressive or derogatory or just haha you're dumb. It was more like, well, I'll explain why this doesn't work, why we don't believe it, why you won't convince this person, that blah 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 blah. And so we thought, April Fool's is coming around. What if one of us pretends that they have been convinced that Adam Mizner's stuff is real, and then the other guys either fall for it or get angry and this and that, and we made 3 videos on our separate channels that were sort of like a timeline-esque thing. And the funniest
I love video trolling, man. I've done it. Haven't done it for a while, but I've done it before. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Matrix, Jake Mace stuff. That was amazing. But I was gonna say, Nick did an amazing thing that elevated the whole just prank thing to an almost social experiment. Because when he was the one that chose, well, I'll be the guy that supposedly got convinced of Mizner. What he said is, I've been only to one workshop and I already managed to use some of that teaching in my BJJ class. And then he literally pretended with his jujitsu student to make him hop so that he could get a deep double leg. And I've never seen anything like mix those two, where it's like the typical push and then whoop, deep double leg down on the floor. And I kid you not, the amount of people who were bravo, see, Mizner is legit, surprised all of us. And that's elevated the whole thing into an actual experiment, because if the real thing is so easy to fake, where supposed trained people, these like people who train this and observe it and know what it is, can't tell a difference between a guy just doing a really bad impersonation of Mizner into a double leg, isn't that like a glaring issue on the whole thing? So we made a
Where
follow-up on
they
that.
couldn't even tell the difference between like an obvious fake guy pretending to be a fake guy. Well, that's amazing. That I have a friend named Yunus Emery. He's a fantastic jujitsu black belt from Turkey, and he made this hilarious video about where he plays a fake martial arts instructor, and it's supposed to be an obvious joke.
Right.
And he's like in character, and he's like, "Okay, I'll teach you how to use my deadly kung fu to stop a sword." And his assistant has a sword, and he chops overhead, and he's like, "Ha!" And he catches the sword with his hands, and then it's obviously fake, and don't ever do that in real life. So he puts this up online, thinking it's going to get some laughs, and instead, it gets a bunch of people thinking this is real. This is either a real guy who believes what he's saying, or he's a real master of this kung fu style where he can literally catch swords with his hands. And then these two factions start fighting in the comments. Oh, this guy sucks. This guy's a fake. I want to dojo storm this guy and punch him in the face and show him he's fake. And the other guys are like, no, he's totally legit. And then there was a third faction saying, well, actually, that's not how you catch a sword, because you have to focus your chi in the right way. And it's the amount of people who got the joke was very, very slim.
Everything but those people. Everything got wrong. And the kitchen sink, except people just laughing at the joke. That's crazy. Much crazier than this. But yeah, it feels, yeah, it's very unfortunate. And one of those guys, Alan, like to bring it back to what we spoke earlier, he points out a lot of times, because he issued a public challenge for any UK-based Mizner person not to fight, not even a spar, nothing, just a friendly exchange where you make him try and hop. That's all. He'll just stand there, make somebody who's not willing hop. And of course, excuses, excuses, and excuses, and excuses. And one of the more common excuses I think that he would get is, well, I'm not good as Adam. Well, I'm not good as Sifu Mizner. And Alan's always following it up. Well, is Adam that bad of a teacher? Like, can
Yeah.
you not replicate anything from him? Like, just the vast number of people who are saying the same thing, where I can't do that, but he can. It's another glaring issue with the whole thing. And recently, somebody I think accepted his challenge, so that might be happening soon. But it's just try and make him jump. So I don't know. It's a very
Yeah,
unfortunate.
that's
Whereas,
that, that's kind of nuts to think about. I have a student who has been training with me for about 6 months, and in the last 2 months, he's won 4 professional fights.
wow, there
And
you go.
I don't say that to brag about myself and say, "Look how good of a teacher I am," just to illustrate the point that the things that I teach my students, they can do. They can
Yeah,
do the things that I teach them. And I think that anybody, that shouldn't be the exception. That should be the norm in martial arts. The students should be able to do the things that the teacher teaches them, and even do them better, because they're often younger, healthier. Like this guy, he's younger, healthier, fewer injured joints and whatnot than me, and so he's able to take some of the things I can teach him and do them even better than I can. Again, that should be the norm, not the exception.
yes.
But I met a guy who, I don't know how much he trained with Adam, but he did attend some of his seminars. He did train one on one with him at some point, and when I asked him, like, how does this work? I'm trying to be open minded here. I'm not going to tell you you're dumb for believing this, but I want an explanation of how it works. And he said, "Well, you'll never see a guy like Adam in like an MMA fight using these techniques." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "Because under stress and under pressure, it's very difficult to put your mind in the right frame of mind to use it." And I said, "Oh, okay, okay, all right, sure, why not?" So basically, parlor tricks.
Right.
So essentially, whether it's a literal illusion, magic trick, if you will, sleight of hand or whatever, or a literal use of ergokinesis, magic, either way, it's equally useful, is what he's trying to say. But even
Yeah.
in the situation you presented there, where the guy essentially wanted just a demonstration where the disciple could make him hop
Yeah.
without fighting back,
Yeah.
even under those parameters, that should be able to work. That should be able to hold up. Like a
And there,
student of Mizner should be able to do those things.
yes, that's and it's almost as if it's completely different rules that apply to this than to any other martial art thing.
Mm,
It's super incredible. It's but it's besides like woo incredible and this and that. It's unfortunate because I view that as a ginormous scam, and
mm,
scams are not fun. So a lot of these people, when even when they would like engage with me in a polite manner, I it's so hard for me, like, even even when I'm trying to be thought out and nice, I still really dislike Adam because from
mm,
all of our viewpoints, it's not just some misguided teacher, it's really a scam artist. Like,
mm.
that's it's a very bad thing. So you can't really ask like people like us to sort of extend way too much of a hand to Adam. We will criticize it. Besides just it being false, it's a scam, and we that's a big no-no. Just from a moral standpoint, it's not a good thing. So
Sure. Where would you say is the biggest amount of harm being done? Because we might look at Adam and think, "Oh, he's mostly harmless. He's not hurting anyone."
yeah,
But
I think
at the same time, where are the biggest harms to be found here. I'm just pushing back, playing devil's advocate a little bit here
Sure.
for the sake of conversation, even though I'm 100% in agreement with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Steel manning and is much more important than straw manning.
Yeah,
So, well, I was um, even though it's not really steel, but it doesn't matter. But the point still stands in its own vacuum.
sure, sure.
In my opinion, the biggest danger for people and the biggest, let's say, a sin, is so when people tell me, why are you making all these videos and explaining these positions, just go out there and go and pay for a workshop. They are so expensive, and
Yeah,
it's so much crazier than if you were to go to any gym of any kind, even like a traditional martial arts dojo. It's so much more than that. And
yeah. I
like,
was quoted something like $2,400
right,
for a
something,
seminar, something
it's
like
in
that.
the thousands. It's in the thousands, and both seminars and workshops and everything, it's so expensive. And it's I think you've spoke about the sunk cost fallacy.
Yes, the sunk cost fallacy, precisely.
That's a very big danger, because if somebody is already a true believer of this thing and maybe pays the first time and really enjoys it, being manipulated, whatever, they will keep paying. They will keep paying to keep that fantasy alive. And that
Hmm.
Adam and all these guys, I'm more on the side that they are aware of it rather than they genuinely believe their stuff. Because a traditional martial artist, McDojo coach or sensei can really believe that they know exactly what they're doing, because more often than not, they are doing real things, just badly, just poorly. They're teaching kicks, punches, just poorly. But they, in their own head, can really believe that they are really good at this. I don't see how these guys can be in that position where they truly believe. Some of them can, sure, but I think
Hmm.
specifically the Mizner person and like those guys alike, I feel like they know they're in on the thing, and that just, oh, that makes
Yeah,
me angry. Not gonna lie, like
yeah,
I
yeah.
tend to be jokey about it and try and be measured, but it's not a nice feeling. I have to say, it's not a nice.
Oh, definitely not. There was a video circulating around the internet, not a martial arts video, but a video of a women's retreat where these ladies paid
Okay.
$4,000 to go out to the woods and express their anger and frustration at the world or at men or everything they felt was holding them down, which amounted to them beating the ground with sticks while screaming obscenities at the air. And a lot of people, uh, understandably started making fun of these ladies, like, "What the heck? Why would they pay $4,000 to go out to the woods and scream and shout?" My response was, "Well, maybe they're angry because they paid $4,000 for a trip to the woods and all they got was a stick."
Yeah.
But the reason I bring that up is because I'm now wondering who got a more raw deal. The ladies who paid $4,000 to go out to the woods and scream and shout and have some kind of cathartic experience to vent their frustration, or the guys who paid thousands of dollars to learn the magic power of ergokinesis from Adam Mizner in one of his seminars.
Oof. I'd say the girls, I think, honestly, that they're in a better spot, because it's been scientifically demonstrated that you can, in fact, have a cathartic experience from bashing things really hard and
Hmm?
really letting it out, still for a ridiculous price, versus
Yeah.
paying a ridiculous price for something that has never been demonstrated to be real. But again, some of these people might find that experience of training with Adam Misner as a positive thing, as a catharsis or whatever. But we just I feel uncomfortable just thinking about that, because that to me doesn't say, well, let these people enjoy what they like. No, it tells me these people are manipulated to the point that they will feel a cathartic experience from somebody who just not seemingly not a really nice guy. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, you brought up a point earlier where you hesitated to say, like, there's a right way or a wrong way to train, and you clarified that, you quantified that by saying the right way to learn how to win a fight.
Yeah.
So we can say we can excuse these guys saying, "Oh, well, they're just having fun. They're not doing any harm. It doesn't hurt anybody except their paycheck, their hard-earned money, which ultimately is representative of their time that they will never get back, which is the sum total
Yeah.
of their life, their finite mortal existence upon this planet, which is precious. And
Yes.
if we waste that, we waste everything because, as the old saying goes, you cannot kill time without injuring eternity."
Ooh.
But it's harmless, right? So
Right.
so what would you say is the right way for these guys to go about spending their time, their money, and their efforts?
Ooh. I think any religion,
Hmm,
because a lot of people will compare stuff like this to religion and to
sure.
this and that. But it really is different when you multiply, when you just compare negative effects of this thing versus negative effects of that thing. There's positives and negatives everywhere. And it feels like these people are searching for a community, are
Hmm,
searching for some sort of spiritual, I don't know, release or answer or whatever. And it's Meisner and these people who sort of just like what's that animal in called in English, the blood sucking twirly black things. They just
oh,
they just
a
um
leech?
leech. They just
Yeah.
leech the
Mm,
energy from those people. And like whether somebody's an atheist, agnostic atheist, religious, deist, whatever, we all know that structurally, things that we find in religion, like community,
mhm,
like mutual understanding, and all those benefits, are real, are demonstrably positive. And I feel
yeah.
like these people are already going into that sort of spiritual domain, exercise some further skepticism, and you can find the same fulfillment in different areas, different places where you will get the same community, same stuff. But it, like, so I think I've mentioned in the comments, I'm sort of a tentative like atheist, where
Okay.
that's not my belief in the sense of I know that God does it. I hate that. That's such a stupid thing. It's I'm an open book because
Okay.
there's so much out there. There's so many religions, so many ideas that I can't just tie myself to one because I don't know. So I start with I don't know and I want to learn. But my base position has to be that of disbelief. And
So
that
basically a skeptic,
yes,
which is
yes,
importantly
and
different than an atheist. Like, atheist
yeah,
is essentially, against the idea of God.
yes,
Agnostic,
especially in the
meaning
internet.
it's impossible to know, and those
Yeah.
words often get confused and conflated by, people who hold a similar belief to yourself, which is, "I don't know, and let's find out what there is to find out."
Yes, I feel like I'm the common denominator is the agnostic element
Hmm,
because I feel like obviously you're a deeply religious man and you're deeply philosophical about all that. I feel like I have more in common with you than a typical internet atheist
hmm,
because it feels like that side of learning and side of accepting sort of the agnostic position where you have reached a conclusion through your lifetime. You have reached a point where now this is your understanding. I'm
right.
that just earlier. And who knows, I might diverge, I might go this and there, but I feel like these two groups are much closer to each other than the typical internet anti-theist who is like poo-poo everything, poo-poo bad. I just hate that. So it feels like from that position, for somebody who's still searching for stuff, I feel like these people probably would benefit a lot from sort of adopting that view. And then need if they have that spiritual need, there
Hmm.
are venues to do that in a much better way than some guy pretending to throw you around. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, like
That is such an interesting answer, especially coming from a skeptical person as yourself. Um, yeah, I remember years ago, UC Berkeley did a study on human longevity in correlation to religious practice.
right,
And it's not a unique study. Other studies have been performed, like the Seventh Day Adventists, for example, are very proud of throwing out a study showing that their members live longer than the average American, for example, and they often attribute that to their vegetarian lifestyle because they're vegetarians.
right.
But UC Berkeley did a more comprehensive study studying a larger sample of religions and so on, and they found largely, um, not to toot my own horn because the Mormons won the competition, woohoo! Uh, but they found that religious people, people who belong to a community that has structure, that has principles, that has rules, that often has dietary practices, etc., tend to live longer than those who don't.
Oh
And
yeah,
there are a lot of reasons for that, sociological reasons, physiological reasons, etc. But yeah, it is very interesting that there are demonstrably, empirically benefits of having that kind of structured life. So it's it is something that I think is craved by the human being. We want further light and knowledge and truth outside of what we currently possess, like all of us. No matter what we currently know, if we have any level of wisdom, as Socrates said, that we have to understand that we know nothing in comparison to the grand scope of what there is to know. And so we're
yes,
always going to be searching for more. So yeah, it makes sense from that perspective that these guys are going to someone claiming esoteric knowledge and abilities, trying to learn the truth behind that thing. And unfortunately, when that thing is a lie, just a downright lie, I'm going to call it what it is. I'm not going to beat about the bush and give it a
yeah.
second and a third and a fourth chance. It's a lie, and lies never do one lick of good for us. A lie, I said this in my live stream yesterday, a lie puts us in hell physically, metaphorically, literally, in every other sense. It stops us from progressing.
Yeah.
It makes not only does it make us lose credibility in the eyes of others, it makes us lose credibility in our own eyes. We can no longer respect ourselves if we are a liar. And if we can't respect ourselves, then everything might as well be true. And so the guy saying, I can make you do a magic bunny hop by touching you is no different than Jesus for all we are for all practical intents and purposes. Anyway, that brings
Yeah.
us into the realm of chaos, and this is starting to sound like a Jordan Peterson talk all of a sudden because I've said chaos, and now we have to talk about order and all this. Anyway,
Right. Right. But
but maybe the man was
this,
onto something there.
yeah, that's true. But well, this is a martial arts channel primarily, but it's also
Yeah,
about geeky stuff, and I want to push on the geeky angle a bit more with the rest of the martial geeks gang.
yeah,
But if if ever there's a great Ramsey Dewey talks religion channel, the very philosophical side. So that's where maybe these conversations, maybe not just me, but you could do live streams. I'd watch like conversations and talks and like podcast type thing about philosophy. I'd absolutely watch the
for sure,
biggest.
for sure.
So just an idea what you might do, and maybe have
Yeah.
me on.
For sure, but yeah, the same line of conversation, bringing it back to comic books, for example, is very much like writing a good story versus writing a bad story. In a bad story, there's no structure. Anything goes. Everything's a lie and nothing's a lie. In a good story, just like a good Superman story, for example, Superman has limitations. His powers are clearly spelled out. His limitations are clearly spelled out. And so that's the only way to make a godlike character interesting, is to
Right.
specifically give him limitations and make him live by those rules, to give him order.
Right.
A chaotic Superman doesn't work. It's not fun.
Right.
So
That also gets into the whole thing about whether it's ontologically true or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but why the Jesus story is so compelling and why Superman really is just a little fraction of that idea done in modern times, because it's an everlasting idea, because
sure.
God existing, yes or no, I don't know, and regardless of that, I cannot comprehend him. Whether he's real or not, I cannot comprehend it. What I would be able to comprehend is Jesus Christ in the flesh coming and being who he is, and having that relation of a human to me. So that's what Superman is. So that's why this
Huh.
is, to me, why I find it compelling, because I feel like if that's, like, you obviously believe, if that's the truth, that's probably why it was chosen, why it wasn't like it's described in earlier texts of the Old Testament, where it always seemed like there's a struggle between man comprehending God. So Jesus feels like a universal concept that just spreads even in comic books and here and there and in all these stories, and it's just us having that vessel to whatever God might be. So yeah, this is okay. I might be getting too philosophical, but
No, that's really cool. I mean, we need a comprehensible physical symbol for a more abstract idea to make sense.
right,
Like,
right,
absolutely. Like, even going back to Jesus, for example, there's the idea of Jesus suffering for the sins of the world, which is such an abstract idea. Like, how do you even wrap your mind around that? Like, what does that even mean? But then
right,
we have the physical symbol of the suffering on the cross, like the blood, the crown of thorns, the whipping, and all of this. And that's something we can wrap our minds around, like, oh, that hurts. That hurts a lot. That's very painful.
right.
And so that symbol suddenly makes the abstract idea more comprehensible.
Yeah,
So yeah. Huh. Cool, man. Very cool.
cool stuff. Well, I'm not sure. We're almost at the 2 hour minute mark. Well, 2 hour minute. Bravo, two
Yeah.
hour mark. So 157 minute mark. I don't want to bother you anymore any further. If you have things to do,
Hey, not a
we
bother.
can.
I do need to start getting ready to head out and teach a class right now,
Right.
but yeah,
And I
this
have
is
to eat
this has
before
been
work.
awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you
This
so
has been
much.
awesome, and it's great to meet another martial artist from your country. I have only met two guys from the Czech Republic so far, both martial artists, awesome
No,
dudes, and it's Czech Republic, right?
it's Croatia. Croatia.
Dang it, I'm sorry.
It's all right. Don't worry.
Croatia.
It's all right.
Croatia.
It's
Fail. I failed.
I- it's all right. It's
I
a
misremembered.
Yeah.
Never mind. I've met her. Hold on.
Have you met anyone from Croatia ever?
I think so. I'm wondering if I'm confusing these guys I met, whether or not they were from Croatia or the Czech Republic. Ah,
Well, languages are pretty similar, and then there
really?
is like historical intertwined things that happen. But it's like these are the Balkan states, like just off the coast of Italy, and it's
Oh man,
Croatia, Bosnia, Slovenia, Serbia, and all these countries. So
this
that
this reminds me of a time I was doing a podcast with Zach Tellender. He's a
oh,
weightlifting coach, and we're speaking for like 3 hours. And I was a longtime subscriber of his channel, And then during the sign off, I called him Zach Tolander. He looked at me like, what? And I was like so embarrassed, like, I really am a fan. I didn't mean to mispronounce your name. Sorry, man.
That is funny.
Ah, anyway, that's embarrassing, but I do
It's all right.
appreciate talking to you, man. This has been fun.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Been an honor and a pleasure, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This is, I think I contained myself well. I think I did. I've been a fan for a long time, so that really
Well,
means
appreciate
the
that, man.
world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so
And
much.
everybody in the comments, there's a bunch of comments that I will definitely check out later on because we were talking about a bunch of stuff. So I'll cover those and probably answer some of those questions in a video afterwards. And Max says I might be in Croatia next year. If you do, let's train, man. That'd be awesome. Anyways, yeah, I don't know how to close these off yet, so it's really informal and yeah, just take
Yeah,
care and
I think you
know
just
that
push the X button on the screen, unless you're talking about how to do it with
right, right.
the right
I'm
thing to say
pressing
before we stop.
right. I'm gonna announce it. I'm pressing the X button, and now the
Wait,
stream
wait,
will end.
wait. I know the perfect way to sign off. It's
Yes.
very, very simple. Starts
Okay.
with thanks for watching, and I think you know the rest.
And get out there and train.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take care.
You too.